Look, I need to talk to you about what's happening in Toronto right now because the Blue Jays are making some serious noise. We just saw them sign Dylan Cease to the biggest contract in franchise history, and if you think that's where the story ends, you haven't been paying attention. Multiple reports are coming out, including a massive one from Shidavidi, and what they're telling us is that Toronto is doubling down. They're not just dipping their toes in the water anymore. They're diving in head first, and frankly, it's about time. Let me start with what Shidavidi is reporting because this is the most encouraging news Blue Jays fans could hope for. According to him and Ben Nicholson-Smith, Toronto now has both the time to let the market develop and an even more enticing platform to tempt other players as they continue to strengthen their roster. And here's the kicker. They remain in pursuit of Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker, among other position player targets. Let that sink in for a second. A lot of people assumed that once they dropped over $200 million on Dylan Cease, they'd be tapping out. They'd be done. They wouldn't have the resources or the willingness to chase after someone like Kyle Tucker or even bring back Bo Bichette. That assumption was dead wrong. The Blue Jays are going harder than ever. They're willing to spend serious money, and they're heavily involved in both the Bo Bichette negotiations and the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes. This isn't just posturing. This isn't just the front office trying to make fans feel good. They're actively scouting, actively pursuing, and actively building something special. By the way, if you missed it, they'd been tracking Dylan Cease for a while. They tried to acquire him multiple times during the season. This wasn't a panic move or a last-minute decision. This was calculated, deliberate, and part of a bigger plan. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. According to multiple reports, Bo Bichette wanted to come back even before they made these big moves. So it stands to reason that's still the case now, and he'll remain in contact with the Blue Jays. Beyond Bichette, the Blue Jays are well positioned to land the pitching they need, including one late-inning arm and ideally a swing arm who could start if needed. That's a fascinating detail because it tells you they're not just thinking about filling holes, they're thinking about depth, versatility, and building a roster that can handle the grind of a full season and a deep playoff run. The verbiage in these reports from Davidi and Nicholson-Smith is crucial. These are the reporters who are most connected to the team, and what they're saying is that Toronto is all in on Bo Bichette. I'm getting a strong vibe that Bo is going to return, but here's what makes the Dylan Cease signing even more important. It's not hindering their ability to get Bichette back, it's actually helping. It's showing Bo that management is fully committed to winning. They've just added one of the best pitchers available in free agency. That's a statement. That's the kind of move that tells a player, we're serious about this, we're building something real, and we want you to be part of it. If they can bring back Bo Bichette, add Dylan Cease, and land one of the better relief arms available, that's an A-grade offseason. Maybe not an A+, but it's damn close, and they're still interested in Kyle Tucker on top of all that. The most obvious next priority, according to Mitch Bannon of The Athletic, would be bringing Bo Bichette back. These reports are all coming from Blue Jays beat writers this morning and afternoon because once the Dylan Cease signing became official, they had time to check with their sources about what's next. The consensus is clear. Priority number one is Bo Bichette. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Cease signing won't stop their interest in keeping Bichette, but with Ernie Clement and Will Wagner able to fill roles, retaining Bo isn't necessarily mandatory. They could pivot to guys like Jorge Polanco or make a trade for someone like Ketel Marte. That's another variant of the move they could make, letting Bichette walk and upgrading elsewhere. Though most people tend to believe that Bo Bichette is coming back. And honestly, that's what makes the most sense for both sides. When you're looking at the next move, it's probably going to be a relief arm, at least based on what we're hearing. Sources are telling Yahoo Sports that the Jays have been one of the most aggressive teams in the high-leverage reliever market. They could make a move to pair someone like Devin Williams, Edwin Diaz, Pete Fairbanks, or Robert Suarez with Jeff Hoffman. The reports that came out after the Dylan Cease signing indicate they're heavily involved in pursuing a reliever, so I'm expecting something to happen relatively soon. Edwin Diaz has been heavily linked to Toronto for weeks now, going back to reports from Ken Rosenthal. But Kyle Tucker's also very much in play, and that's where things get really interesting. There's a world where they let Bo Bichette walk, sign Kyle Tucker, and then trade for Kettle Marty. The good thing about signing Dylan Cease is that they saved all their prospects. They didn't have to give up any assets for a position player, so if they want to go that route in a trade, they still can. They have highly touted prospects. Trey Savage is untouchable. They have Arjun Namala, Gage Stanforth, Jake Bloss, and RJ Track. Their farm system is in a much better spot than it was a couple years ago, especially after they sold at the trade deadline 2 years back and restocked with talent. You even have guys like Joey Loperfido who would bring value in a trade. But here's the thing. They don't have to trade prospects for starting pitching anymore because they got the guy they wanted in Dylan Cease. I'm not entirely sold on the idea that they wanted any of the other starters available, guys like Roki Sasaki or Ranger Suarez. I think they had their eyes on Cease all along, and they got him. Now they can focus their prospect capital on position players if they choose to go that route. Multiple reports, including one from Keegan Matheson that I'll cover in more detail tomorrow, are saying the Blue Jays are all in on Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette if they become available. Everyone's going to be watching Bo Bichette now, whether he's seen as a second baseman or a shortstop. If you're giving a pitcher who's coming off a 4.55 ERA season over $200 million. And for the record, I'm a huge fan of the deal because ERA doesn't tell the full story here. His expected ERA is a full run lower than his actual ERA last year. Then you can easily pay that same amount to Bo Bichette if that's what it takes. It would be a similar contract structure. But there's another angle to consider. If Bichette signs elsewhere, the Blue Jays can pivot to another big free agent bat like Kyle Tucker. According to sources, Toronto has kicked the tires on Tucker, but the team's interest level is unclear at this point. That's because if Bo walks, you go for Kyle Tucker. That makes perfect sense strategically. But here's my take. I'm not entirely sold on the Jays getting both at this point. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're probably going to end up with one or the other, and honestly, that's still a great outcome. I wouldn't be surprised if they make another trade for a bat, regardless of what happens with Bichette or Tucker. The first job is done. They have a starter who complements their rotation perfectly. Outside of the ideal scenario of somehow landing an elite lefty, which wasn't available at the level of Dylan Cease, they've addressed their biggest need. You now have 5 really strong starters. Maybe not every single one is elite individually, but together they form an elite rotation. You have high-velocity guys, pitchers who strike out tons of batters, and yes, guys who give up their fair share of home runs, which seems to be a mandatory requirement for Blue Jays starting pitchers. Dylan Cease has like a 10% fly ball to home run ratio, which isn't great, but most of their pitchers have similar issues with home run rates. They're in a great position to bring Bo back. If they don't, they have other plans. They're going to be heavily involved with Kyle Tucker. More moves are absolutely imminent. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Keep an eye out for the next move being for a reliever. We'll keep you updated every step of the way. Edwin Diaz has been heavily linked to the Jays dating back weeks, and that connection isn't going away. The Blue Jays are building something real here. They're not just talking about competing. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and for a fan base that's been waiting for this kind of commitment, it's exactly what they needed to see. Stay tuned because this story is far from over, and things are about to get very interesting in Toronto.